Melissa.
Hey, Ryan. I'm going to add on to her intro here because you're also a beloved member of this community and you frequently give of yourself. You really set a beautiful example. And for those who attend regularly, I'm sure you recognize Ryan, who often joins our clergy on the altar as a lay Eucharistic minister. And if you've attended any of our cookouts, he serves in the role of Master of the Grill, his unofficial title. And more importantly, he also serves on St. Peter's Vestry, which for those who are not familiar is our governing board. And from my own personal perspective, you are one of my favorite people here in St. Peter's. You have a warmth about you, a cheerfulness about you, a joy about you, and I leave any conversation with you with a lightness, which I expect I will today as well. And so as we make this segue here to talk about your vocation and finding beauty in education, I have to say I can't imagine anyone else who could be a more positive force and joyful presence to young students. So before we dive into the way back machine to your childhood, is there anything else you want to add here?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go way back now. What is your earliest memory of beauty?
Yeah. Gosh, thank you, Melissa. I'm like, let me not start crying already. I will before this is done. My earliest memory of beauty goes back to, I'm originally from Southern California, and I would drive up sometimes the coast with my parents and just going up to the central coast of California, the northern coast, and just seeing the windswept pines, seeing the marine layer flow in. That, to me, is still one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to. And that is my earliest memory. And then when I think about it in the sense of education, which is what we're talking about today, I really felt and understood beauty and education as a student. I was in a peer leadership class, and I had a teacher that just really celebrated us knowing each other and being our whole selves. So, to me, that's beautiful.
It is. That's very beautiful. I want to talk also here as we lead into that. So, as followers of Jesus, we know we serve a God who loves children.
Yes.
And Jesus mentions numerous times in the Gospels about welcoming children, protecting children, and loving children. He shows a tenderness towards them. You've mentioned this teacher, but how is Jesus also an example of a guidepost for you? And how does that connect to the beauty you bring into your sphere of influence in education?
Yeah. So I think that is going to help me to kind of transition to these slides. And at some point, I know we talked about this, I want to talk about when I've seen children not welcomed and when I've seen families not included. Let's do happy first. Okay, so this is beauty and belonging. And so when I think about it, right, Melissa, you talk about Jesus loving children, and he just sees us for who we wholly are and loves us. Part of being an educator, something that's really important, is that children understand that they can and should make beautiful things. All right, Ryan, get a hold of yourself. So this is from when I was a teacher. You see the child making notes for herself. Make the leaf bigger, make the face smaller. She's making an exact scientific drawing of an ant. And it's just like, it's trial after trial, and there's joy, right? And so her believing in herself is the thing I needed to cultivate, because if you ever have the joy of seeing me draw, I promise you it is not this beautiful. So it felt like my role as an educator to remind her that she can do more than she thought she could. Play is really important, and joy. Yeah. So this is a GIF at Central Park. This is a lovely second grade class of mine, playing with my co-teacher. And this is the joy of discovery in my current school where I serve as the assistant principal. This is our beautiful hydroponics lab. So the teacher for sciences is there, and they're exploring Lego robotics in the most beautiful classroom in the school. So just that idea of play and discovery, appreciating the beauty of the natural world that God made. This is that same second grade class. We planted and cultivated a garden in our school to make it more beautiful. And we gave back to our community during the pandemic by encouraging immunizations. And I had 2 kids that were appalled by the way that Black lives are being discarded. And I said, so talk. This is one of the big ones. So this is my current role as assistant principal. There's 2 kids here. They're all so happy, can't you tell? They just love being with me. I just bring joy to their life every day. So these are 2 very happy youngsters. And these are kiddos with disabilities. We proudly serve many students with disabilities at our school, many neurodiverse students with joy. This guy usually has hard days. He doesn't always like coming to school. And he noticed this guy having a particularly hard morning, and he's like, how can I help you, Mr. Berry? How can I be here for him? And I'm doing the right thing if that's what they're moved to do naturally. And that's what Jesus would want, for us to love each other and care for each other. And these are some of my peer mentors. And yeah, and I'm really proud of what we do at my current school. We have a laundry room for families to use, so they don't need to want for that. We have a mindfulness room, including a sensory hallway and full sensory space for neurodiverse learners. We have a pantry that delivers not just this, but fresh, good food every week to every family. And we have fresh lettuce. So I think
I'm curious,
this
and
represents a lot of it.
This,
yeah.
Because seeing these, seeing these things though, how do they come to be? When you're thinking about a mindfulness room, when you're how does that happen?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. So this comes with a lot of creative grant writing. This comes with collaborating with leaders and not-for-profits and other companies in our community. This comes from advocacy from students. So the hydroponics lab in particular was envisioned by one of our future 5th graders.
Wow.
He was like, we should grow our own food. And my principal was like, say less. We're gonna have the best hydroponics lab in District 6. So. Yeah. So I think a lot of this just comes from, and this comes from, we started with a vision of we're gonna give our family food because they need it. They need the food. That is their number one expressed need, is like food insecurity. And so it started with we're gonna make it happen. And to be honest, that was it, right? It was really this trusting and it's going to come. And it was a lot of hustle. We shared the leftovers sometimes of the middle school across the street that had a pantry that was already going. And then they saw us and they were just saw our passion and saw our commitment to families. And so Love Kitchen has partnered with us, and we've been able to provide food for every family weekly and it's been a true joy, and it's really just it's really us advocating and families advocating for themselves.
I'm sure also that when you were a teacher, what you learned as a teacher, now that you're administrator,
Yeah.
having leadership that is able to see this
Yeah.
is benefiting the teachers who are working with you.
I like to think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to think so. I get a lot of appreciation for them. They're like, thank God you're here. I try to bring my core value as a leader is love. And it's not always warm and fuzzy, right? It's that love that really burns up, transforms, and changes, and makes something new. And that's what I try to kind of approach things with. So I think they see that it's like he will expect as much of us as he does of himself and his students, and it's from love.
You know, one of the things we had talked about last week, I had mentioned how I didn't realize, I didn't make the connection to what it is I do as a vocation. Is that, do you see yourself as an educator? Do you see that as a spiritual vocation, I should say?
Yeah. Yes, and I think it was sitting in that classroom and as a student, right, and understanding, like, and kind of now comes the parallel story of, like, school was pretty good for me overall. I was bullied a little bit, but, like, school was pretty good for me, and I was, like, well loved by teachers overall. And I have a brother, a lovely brother, who was not loved by teachers.
Yeah.
And so part of why this is like a spiritual vocation, and what's beautiful about this work is you can prevent that.
Yeah.
And I lead the way that I want others to follow me, and I make sure every kid is never alone. I make sure, that teachers understand them for everything that they are, in the most beautiful way.
You took something a painful thing, and now you are in tune to other kids who are experiencing what your brother experienced.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think, and since I started as a counselor, and then I was a teacher, and now I'm a school leader, I think that's good enough. I think that's good. I don't have too many aspirations beyond that. It came from something really painful, and knowing I didn't want that to happen to anyone else.
Yeah. So this relationship you have with the students, the beauty that they then mirror back to you, how has that impacted your relationship with or understanding of God and vice versa? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, so just that story of, like, one of my boys taking care of the other little one, it's just like, that really felt like God's grace showing up in my day.
Yeah.
First thing in the morning, because he didn't have to respond that way, and typically he actually would not.
Yeah.
He definitely would not, and that reminds me of how much God is at work in my school, in our neighborhood, in our community. There's incredible things happening. Like, I think from the pictures and from me talking about the needs of food and security, like, you would think that we're barely holding on, and it's quite the opposite. We're thriving. We've doubled proficiency in math in 1 year.
Wow.
And it's a space where kids aren't just, like, being cared for and loved because they're so cared for and loved. They're learning. And so I think, yeah, I know that's more than what I can do, right? And so that's part of like, I've learned this humility, I think particularly in becoming a school leader and needing to like pray because it's a stressful job, guys. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would imagine also you, obviously, some of this, which you've talked about, that obviously you have a front row seat to the impact of perhaps a tough home situation too. How do you, though, how do you fill your own cup, though, then?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think part of it is just like I enjoy a really kind of spirited and caring relationship with my principal. We're really partners in this work, and I respect her so much and care for her so much, so that really helps me to feel taken care of in this work, and that's why I know the value of like a good leader and try to be one. I really enjoy just like beautiful close friendships. I think community here, like Sunday, is something that is really energizing. Even if I'm like holding the cross or like walking, it's still energizing and restful and lovely. It maybe especially then, actually. And you know, I run, I cook. I talk to Ian. We watch TV. Those are all good things, and I go back to kind of that first vision of beauty, which was a natural one. And that's one of the best ways that I care for myself is being outside, being in the natural world.
You just returned from vacation. What was the most beautiful thing you saw last week?
I was just in Mexico. I was in Santiago de Querétaro and San Miguel de Allende. And the most beautiful thing, I mean, we went to kind of like a nature preserve, and it was up on a hill overlooking the city of San Miguel de Allende, which is already a high elevation. So it was kind of up looking down below, and I think just the way the light looks and the way the sky is in that part of central Mexico is very beautiful. And it's a delight. I'd recommend it to anyone. It is like the safest place in Mexico. So if you had any concerns about that too, you could put those away.
Anything else you wanted to share from here?
You know, no, I don't think so. I think I have really gone through it, and I'll leave it back to this fun picture because I think this really captures it, that I know I'm doing my job well when we're playing and happy and joyful. Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing.
It is. I think that's a beautiful place to end. Thank you so much for all you give to children. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa.